American money, sealed indictments, and the silence after October 7th. This is not a court verdict. This is not a claim that every allegation is proven. This is my personal reaction to an article published by Yahoo News on July 15, 2026, written by Timothy Pratt about the arrest of James Fergie Chambers after a United States extradition request. The article discusses Chambers, his Gaza-related donations, and a sealed U.S. indictment alleging material support for Hamas. And my reaction is simple. This story opens a question much larger than one wealthy donor. What happens when money born inside legitimate American business travels into political and humanitarian channels connected to Gaza, and the United States later claims that some of that money may have crossed the line into material support for Hamas? The indictment is sealed. That means the public does not yet know the exact money trail. We do not know the specific transfers, we do not know the specific recipients, we do not know the evidence or the government's full theory. But the existence of an extradition request means the United States believes it has something serious enough to ask another country to arrest and surrender an American citizen. And that leads to another important point. Spain is not some automatic servant of Washington. Spain's relationship with the United States has been strained and controversial, especially over military cooperation and foreign policy. Yet even Spain, a country currently willing to defy Washington on major international questions, arrested Chambers after the United States filed the papers. That does not prove guilt. It does not prove the indictment is correct. But it does suggest that the American request was not treated as empty paper. So the question becomes unavoidable. What does the United States believe it knows about the money? And even with all the limitations, the story forces a disturbing question. What if American money, created inside legitimate American business, moved into networks that help sustain the world around Hamas before and after October 7? Not suitcase money from some shadowy cave, not imaginary money from a foreign enemy, but wealth born inside American capitalism. Corporate wealth, family wealth, stock wealth, the kind of wealth produced by the same American system that lectures the world about law, transparency, democracy, and accountability. According to the article, Chambers was connected to the Cox Communications fortune and sold family stock worth about $250 million in mid-2023. He then funded progressive and humanitarian projects, including more than $1 million in Gaza-related aid, according to his attorney. The public accusation now floating over the case is material support for Hamas, but the details remain hidden behind a sealed indictment. That is where the story becomes larger than one man. Because if the government has a money trail, then the government knows how to trace money. It knows how to follow accounts. It knows how to examine charities. It knows how to test the difference between humanitarian aid and organizational support. It knows how to ask who benefited, who controlled the path, and who knew what. So the public is entitled to ask, why does this power appear suddenly in some cases and disappear in others? After October 7th, the world was told many things. We were told about humanitarian concern. We were told about political speech. We were told about protest. We were told about context. We were told about suffering. But we were not given a full public accounting of how much Western money, including American money, had moved through networks that may have strengthened Hamas directly or indirectly. And now we see a sealed case, a sealed indictment, a sealed money story, a sealed explanation. The government may know something, the public does not. That pattern is familiar. Institutions keep the evidence. Institutions control the language. Institutions decide what the public is allowed to see. Then institutions ask the public to trust them. But trust does not grow in darkness. And for Jews, the darkness has consequences. This is why my mind immediately returns to another case where public trust depended on visibility, and visibility never came. When Paul Kessler died after a public confrontation in California, the public was told there was video. The public was told there were witnesses. The public was told authorities had reconstructed a sequence. But the central evidence did not become public in the way ordinary citizens could examine for themselves. The case dragged on. The defendant remained free. The trial disappeared. The plea arrived. The sentence shrank. And the public was left with fragments. Now, in this federal story, we again see the same basic structure. A serious accusation, controlled evidence, official silence, and the public left outside the room. The subjects are different, the courtroom is different, the country involved in the arrest is different, but the architecture feels familiar. Power knows more than it tells. Power asks for trust. Power hides the trail. To be clear, the concern raised by Chambers supporters should not be mocked. Humanitarian aid should not automatically be treated as terrorism support. If someone truly gave food, medicine, shelter, or civilian relief, that is not the same thing as knowingly supporting terrorism. Human beings in war zones need help, but the opposite danger must also be spoken. Humanitarian language can be used as a shield. Charity can become camouflage. Aid can move through structures controlled by armed groups. Money can be labeled for civilians while strengthening the rulers who control the territory. And Hamas was not merely a political slogan. Hamas carried out October 7th. So when American wealth enters Gaza-related channels, the public has a right to ask where it went, who received it, and whether it helped ordinary people or helped the machinery of violence. This is not anti-humanitarian. It is anti-blindness. If the indictment is weak, unseal enough for the public to understand why the government acted. If the indictment is strong, unseal enough for the public to understand how American money traveled. If the money was innocent, say so clearly. If the money reached Hamas-linked structures, say so clearly. But do not leave the public inside fog, because fog is where institutional power thrives. The most disturbing possibility is not only that one wealthy American may have made bad donations. The disturbing possibility is that American legitimacy itself may have produced funds that later moved into the ecosystem around Hamas. A company can be legal, a fortune can be legal, a stock sale can be legal, a donor can use beautiful words, a transfer can be called humanitarian, and still, somewhere downstream, the effect can be monstrous. That is why the phrase legitimate American business matters. If money born from ordinary American commerce flowed into channels that sustained Hamas, then October 7th was not funded only by distant enemies. It was also possibly touched by wealth created under the protection of American law. That possibility should shake people. But will it? Will Congress ask? Will journalists follow the money? Will courts explain? Will federal investigators reveal the trail? Or will the system do what it often does? Seal the file. Control the evidence. Argue procedure. Tell the public to wait. Let time pass. Let outrage cool. Let the story become old. That is the part that feels most familiar. After October 7th, people said never again. After Paul Kessler's death, people asked whether public Jewish life was becoming physically unsafe in America. After court delays, sealed evidence, soft sentences, and institutional silence, the public learned another lesson. Violence is only one part of the story. The other part is what institutions do afterward. Do they expose, or do they contain? Do they explain, or do they manage? Do they enforce law equally, or do they protect the machinery around power? In the Chambers case, we do not yet know the truth. The indictment is sealed. The allegations are not proof. The defense will have its arguments. The government must prove its case. But the question is already public. Did American money help support networks, institutions, or political structures connected to the world that made October 7th possible? And if the answer is yes, then the public deserves more than slogans about humanitarian aid and more than sealed accusations from the government. The public deserves the trail, because money is not abstract. Money is oxygen. Money builds offices. Money moves people. Money pays lawyers. Money funds organizations. Money buys time. Money buys silence. Money buys influence. Money buys distance between action and consequence. And when money flows into a violent political ecosystem, the public should not be told to look away because the original source was respectable, wealthy, philanthropic, or American. The old question was, who pulled the trigger? The modern question is also, who paid for the world in which the trigger could be pulled? That is the question this arrest opens. And maybe that is why the sealed indictment matters so much. Not because the public is too ignorant to understand, but because the full story of money, ideology, charity, terror, and institutional silence may be far more disturbing than the public has been allowed to see.